Okay, so yesterday I walked outside and I felt a lot of wind. How? Well, basically, it has a lot to do with energy imbalance. Places like Brazil, for instance, get a lot of heat and radiation from the sun, uh, whereas Greenland gets a lot of infrared heat from the planet. It'll get more than the sun proportionally compared to Brazil. If it stayed like this, with a large net radiation surplus and a large net radiation deficit, with no way of the of heat getting one way or another, Earth would get very hot or very, very cold. Luckily, this is not the case because of atmospheric circulation. When there is a bunch of low pressure air, it will converge on a point and rise, pushing the other air out of the way. And when there is a bunch of high pressure air, it will converge at altitude and fall and push a bunch of the air that was low down out of the way as well. Enter distinguished gentleman George Hadley. Basically, he reasoned that areas with higher energy and heat on Earth's surface would transfer that energy into the atmosphere, and air near the equator would be warmer and less dense than the air at the poles because of the radiation and the heat from the sun that I mentioned earlier. So then, the air should rise and travel until it got dense enough to converge. This means that the air should be able to travel from Brazil to Greenland. Truly a brilliant proposal by a brilliant man. In the modern day, we can find evidence of his theory in the Intertropical Convergence Zone, which is a belt of clouds around the Earth. This was called Hadley cell circulation. The Earth was divided into two main hemispheres, and it would rise from the equator and go to the pole and back. Problem: the Earth spins, which produces the Coriolis effect. The equator moves faster than the poles do. It takes just as long for the small arrow at point A to move to point B as it does for the large arrow at the equator to move from point A to point B. Basically, if Santa started in the North Pole and tried to get to your house at the equator, he would end up very far from where you actually were. Luckily, he's a magical being. Earth's rotation also affects the wind, not just Santa. The traveling wind gets pushed off course, and it basically goes perpendicular to the Earth eventually, and not upwards. It doesn't continue up. This creates three cells in each hemisphere: the Hadley, Ferrier, and polar cells. The air near the equator only ever makes it to around Florida, where it becomes too dense and falls. The Ferrier cell sits in between the polar and Hadley cells, and it flows in the opposite direction of either. These cells are important because they are responsible for a lot of weather and fronts